Hi, my name is Lance. I'm a believer who struggled with codependency, approval addiction, and drug and alcohol abuse. Like this empty building, my life was a mess until I found freedom in Christ. I was raised in a family that we attended a Protestant church from as far back as I can remember. My parents taught me the way, the truth, and the life, and also my brother and my sister. We attended church every time the doors were open. We were the first family there, typically, and the last family to leave. I was also raised in a very discipline-oriented family. I was saved when I was 8 years old. Our pastor was kind of like Billy Graham. He was an excellent pastor, and I felt a call, as a young man. Attended church all the time. I was in the youth choir at our church, and I think I really experienced, the first time I experienced the Holy Spirit was when I was like 13 years old. I'm 13, and I'd been struggling with, a life in church and a life outside of church. I had my friends at church, that we all were very dedicated. And then when I get back in my neighborhood, I had my friends that did not attend church, and there was alcohol in their families and a lot of violence and those type of things. Also, when I was 13, I was starting to learn about sex. And it was from the wrong sources. It wasn't with my parents, it was from my buddies in my neighborhood. As I was telling you before, I was very shy and I was afraid of girls. And my buddies in the neighborhood would talk about sex, and I was just very embarrassed by it. But I had a private life where I fantasized privately about having sex, and that became a lifelong addiction to self-gratification. And so I was really struggling with my childhood. As I said before, I was raised in a family that there was a lot of discipline. I'd had an issue when I was 11 years old where my father had whipped me. He would discipline me with a belt. And so when I was in the 5th grade, I'd gotten in trouble with my mom. And when my dad got home from work that night, he took me in the room, and he would always preface a whipping by, "Son, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you." And I remember thinking at the time, like, "Are you kidding me?" And he gave me such a whipping that the belt left welt marks on my legs. And when I attended school the next day, he'd also done a bonus thing where he had bought a haircutting kit and to cut all my hair off. So back in the 60s, nobody went around with a shaved head. And so I was in school in the spring that year with welt marks on my legs and a shaved head. And I just remember how humiliated and embarrassed I was. And later on that summer, to add to the issues that I was having about isolating, my mother actually had flown into a rage one day because I wasn't minding her. And I really reminded my mother of her father who had actually sexually abused her when she was growing up. So I was just like him. I was loud and overbearing. I was controlling, and I looked just like him. And so she had flown into a rage and was going to whip me back in the bedroom, and actually flown into a rage and was wailing on me with the belt and with her fist. And my older sister actually came down the hall and screamed for my mother to stop. That if she didn't stop, she was going to kill me. And at that point, I kind of dove out my bedroom window and landed in the backyard, and I ended up in the corner of the backyard. I was very angry and didn't understand, my parents and their discipline and what was going on in their lives. And so that's where I began a lifelong struggle of isolating and pushing down my feelings. And so, as I was saying before, here I am in the neighborhood, and my friends are starting to experiment with marijuana and alcohol. And actually, the pastor at my church, I hung out with his son all the time. And while his dad was preaching, we would hop in his dad's Delta 88 car and ride around during church. And his son actually asked me a couple of times, did I want to smoke a joint with him Well, those couple of years, I turned him down. I didn't see any point in it. But later on, when I turned 17, the summer of actually the spring of my junior year in high school, had some friends that we were camping out, and they started experimenting with marijuana, and that was my first time. And I remember how as a young teenager, I was very shy and afraid of people, and smoking marijuana helped me kind of open up, and it made me feel like I was cool and I was funny. And so that's when I started actually smoking pot, which became like a lifelong addiction. Later that summer, after having a background in swimming and being a lifeguard, I actually joined the Navy as a search and rescue swimmer. So my career took off. I left the Tri-Cities and went to California, and then ended up in Hawaii, and we started traveling the world. Back in those days, I wasn't much of a leader. I was more of a follower. And as we traveled, the South Pacific and pulled in a lot of different countries. We experimented with drugs all over the world and alcohol, but all during that time, at least 2 or 3 times a year, there will be somebody in the Navy that would invite me to a youth group, or to a Bible study, or to a Christian barbecue, but I always turned them down. But each time it happened, I would sort of be caught, and it would stop me in my tracks. And I'd think, there really is a God, and you're still checking in on me. But at that point in my life, I was rebellious. I was sort of a prodigal son with no money, and so I basically just lived my life out doing drugs and alcohol. In about the middle of my career, when I was stationed in Florida, I actually met who would become my future wife in a dance club. I was codependent to her issues and she to mine, and we ended up getting married and moving to California. We struggled a lot from the very beginning of our marriage. I was basically her knight in shining armor, and I enabled her so that I could rescue her over and over again. And this culminated in our getting a divorce. And so after our divorce is when my career really took a tumble. I had gone back to try to reconcile with my wife in Florida, and I'd been free from smoking marijuana for about 9 months. So I'd actually made a vow to God that if He would give me my wife back, that I was going to quit drugs and alcohol. And my father had warned me that never make a vow to God unless you are really going to keep it, because the impact of not keeping that vow could be disastrous for your life. And so I flew back to see her, and everything was going well. And then she asked me, she said, if I would just smoke a joint with her, then things would be like old times. And so, to please her, I actually smoked pot with her, but we didn't reconcile. A few days later, I flew back to San Diego, and I was so distraught over her making a decision that we were going to file for divorce that I started drinking again, and everything began to unravel. I'd been smoking pot pretty much my whole Navy career, and was always able to beat the urinalysis test through lots of running and lots of physical fitness and drinking a lot of water. But it was actually time to pay the piper. We actually had a urinalysis test, and I popped positive. And so my career came crashing down. I actually had to go to a captain's mast, and they removed my wings. I wasn't allowed to fly anymore, and I was actually on a path for a bad conduct discharge. But through the prayers of my parents and my family, and actually I had a great career other than getting busted this one time, they allowed me to stay in the Navy, but to retire at a one lower pay grade. So after I got out of the Navy, you thought that would be the end of all my problems, that I would have hit bottom and really sought the Lord. But once free from the Navy, then I thought, well, nobody's going to come looking now, and I can live my life the way I finally want to. And so for the next few years in San Diego, I partied all the time. I smoked pot as much as I wanted to. I was involved in several adulterous affairs, and I had really no friends in San Diego other than the people I knew in the bars. And so I rented a double axle U-Haul trailer. I packed up everything I could cram in that U-Haul. I gave everything else to my neighbor. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. And that's typically my lifestyle was as someone who isolated. I left San Diego and didn't look back. And I had a ounce of marijuana, and I decided that I was going to drive across country and have a long conversation with the Lord. Well, I should have been busted 2 times. As I was leaving the state of California, and I came to the customs stop in Yuma, Arizona, I pulled up and I stupidly, had the marijuana under my seat, and I'd been smoking out of a pipe. And I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't really know about customs, and I could see it from a distance, and there was nothing I could do. It was too late to pull off, and I saw there was one customs vehicle there, and as I pulled up, there was a gentleman with a dog. And so I thought, that's it. I thought, what an idiot. Lord, I get right here, one day into my trip, and I'm going to end up in California State Prison. And so the customs agent came over to the car, asked me how I was doing, and he let the dog go free. And the dog, started running around my truck, and I lost sight of it. And all of a sudden the dog, jumps up, and it's got its paws right on the window with the window rolled down. And I thought, this is it. The dog's going to alert. And the dog just, was panting like there was no problem. And the gentleman said, hey, have a good day. Be careful. And I pulled off, and I remember thinking, my heart was racing, and I thought, you would think that right then I would pull up in the desert and throw the marijuana in a pipe out in the desert and drive off. But I thought, wow, that's a 1 in a million thing. So now I'll probably free the rest of the trip. And so I continued smoking pot. So a day and a half later, I was going across Texas, and I was in a very open section, and it was like for 10 miles in front of you and behind you, you could see any cars on the road, and there was nobody. And I was smoking pot, and I had the windows rolled up with the air conditioning on, and lo and behold, I hear a siren go off, and it's a Texas State Trooper. I don't know where the guy came from, and he pulls up, and I really had no time to roll the windows down and air the truck out. And so, as he's coming over and the windows are going down, I can almost see smoke leaving my truck. And I thought, way to go, idiot. God gave you fair warning, in Yuma, and you disregarded his warning. And so now you're going to go to a Texas State prison. So he comes over, and he's got kind of like a wry kind of grin on his face, and I thought, I'm in big trouble. And he goes, what are you doing, sir? And I said, I'm starting over, and I'm trying to give my life back to God. He goes, I see you're in the military. I was like, yeah, I made a big mess of my life, and I'm going home, and I'm hoping to start over. And so he stands there, and he kind of grabs his chin. You can see he's thinking about what he's going to do. And I actually had a Bible sitting on the front seat. And he looks at me all of a sudden, he goes, get out of here, man, and God bless you. And I pulled off and had a moment with the Lord. I started crying, and I thought, you really do want me to start over. And it was starting to sort of break through, all these layers of lies that I'd covered up my pain with. And so I drove through the next day, and I was coming through Tennessee, and it was on a Friday night, and I had just a half of a joint left, and I was pulling into Bristol, Tennessee, and I pulled in my driveway with a double axle trailer, and I could see my dad was off in the backyard mowing, and I thought, I'd sit right there in the driveway, and I had a conversation with the Lord, and I said, Lord, I've made a mess of my life. I've been in control, but I've been completely out of control. And I've made all these train wrecks with family and friends, and my divorce and my Navy career, and I've got no friends left anymore. And I'm here, I'm home, and I want to start over. I know I made a vow to you a few years ago, and it really ended disastrously for me. So now I'm just asking you to deliver me from drugs and alcohol, and I want a brand new start. So I said that prayer. I didn't hear God's voice. I mean, there wasn't no thunder or lightning or anything happened. I got out of the car and I had that roach, and I thought, I got to get in the bathroom and get rid of this trash. And my father didn't see me, and I went in, and my mother had the vacuum cleaner going, so I was able to hit the bathroom, and I flushed the roach, and that's been 11 years now that I've had no desire to ever get high again or to drink. And so you would think, well, that solved everything, but actually the Lord had a lot of work to do in me. And so I'm back in the Tri-Cities. I had sort of turned my life over to God, but I haven't turned my will over to Him. And so I started roaming around trying to find a church home in the Tri-Cities, and I ended up at Celebration Church, eventually, and they had a singles ministry, and that's where I met Roger Morrell and Clarissa, and they're great friends of mine to this day, and I thank God for them that they were there with open hearts and an open door to welcome me in. And so I started coming to some of the singles events, and but yet I still had these secret struggles that I'd always had, that I used to cover up with drugs and alcohol. And so Roger started talking about a new ministry that was gonna happen at Celebration Church, called Celebrate Recovery. And a friend of mine, a lady friend, asked me, what did I think about coming? And I remember thinking, well, I'm delivered from drugs and alcohol. I don't need that. And I said, besides, Survivor's on Thursday night, and I can't miss that show. And so a few months went by, and then I thought, well, I'll go one time. And so one Thursday night has now turned into almost 7 years. I always thought I'm always going to be one of those people on the outside looking in, that I'll sit way back here in the back, and they'll never really grow to trust me if they ever learn who I used to be. And that was a lie from Satan. And I used to believe those lies. And I would just sort of slip in and quietly listen and worship and then leave. Well, God's opened doors for me that I never thought could have happened. He's restored my life. He's given me a gift of worship and singing. He's allowed me to sing in the choir for many years, to sing in actually a praise band at CF. I got invited to teach in the children's ministry, and I've been doing that for almost a year now. And I also share with a homeless man at a local Haven to Rest one night of the month. And it's just incredible what God will do in your life if you allow Him to shine the lights into the darkest parts of your heart and bring it out in the open where you can discuss those hurts and hang-ups with God, and He can set you free.